Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there. Welcome back to Reimagining Love. You are joining me today for a really rich episode. Today, it's just you and me and one of our listeners, Christina, who sent me a really thoughtful listener question a little while back. And I've been wanting to explore this question since it came in because I think it gets to some of the universal challenges that we all grapple with and that certainly we grapple with here on Reimagining Love. So you know, if you're a regular listener, that I usually answer listener questions with my guest experts. But here today, I'm going to use the longer format of a solo episode so that we can peel back all of the layers. And I'm going to be, of course, offering Christina some tangible, actionable guidance for her dilemma. But I'm also going to be leaving you with some questions that you can pose to yourself about how to navigate the challenging relationships in your life. And I'm going to be offering you some new tools to add to your relational toolbox. So I appreciate you being here with me today, sharpening your relational skills, working to deepen connections with the people that you love, even when that work is hard. I know that you are doing a service to yourself as well as a service to the people in your life, whether they realize it or not. Because as you've heard me say many times, when you change yourself, you change the system. When you change your relational dance moves, the relational choreography simply cannot continue the way it previously did. I'm going to play for you Christina's question in just a moment, but to preview, you'll hear me talk about some of the feelings I suspect Christina is having. I'm going to be making some hypotheses about family of origin dynamics that may be shaping the moment today. It's also worth saying that we only have Christina's perspective on things. So, I'm going to be taking us around the system and asking us to think about how the people she's talking about, her sisters, may be experiencing the dynamic with Christina. And I will be offering some thoughts about how she can move forward. And at the end, I'm going to address some other questions that have come in recently from listeners, specifically about family of origin roles. So be sure you listen all the way through to hear those. Okay, so let's hear the question from Christina. She is based in Chicago and she uses she, her pronouns.
Hi, Dr. Solomon. I'm hoping you can provide some guidance about my relationship with my sisters. About 8 years ago, after a traumatic experience, I started therapy. Through this journey, I learned that my family of origin had a much larger impact, not all of it positive, than this trauma that happened in my adulthood. Fast forward to present day, I'm the only person in my family to have been to therapy, and it shows. My parents are their own issue, but my relationship with my sisters stresses me out. I want to be closer to them, but while they are my peers in age, they are not my peers in maturity or emotional intelligence. My older sister has severe anxiety, and our family dynamics have evolved around her needs from the beginning. She is unable to receive constructive criticism. While my younger sister and I have the most in common, it seems as if she is slowly removing herself from the family rather than deal with our sister's needs and our parents' dysfunction. I've gotten to the point where I'm learning to set boundaries around my own emotions and that my family does not get to live rent-free in my head anymore. But I do still want to be close to and be my authentic self with my sisters. How do I have a healthy relationship with people who are not emotionally healthy?
Thank you, Christina, for sending in this question. There's a lot that I want to commend you for, which we're going to get into soon. But the first thing I want to do is name some of the different feelings that I imagine and hear are coming up for Christina. Feelings that are wholly understandable in this situation. So first I hear resentment. I imagine that this has been a feeling Christina has been grappling with for a while, perhaps maybe even since she was young. And I imagine that her perspective, her experience was maybe rarely, if ever, validated by her parents. It sounds like there's been this, kind of story about her older sister who really has struggled with anxiety. And we know that when one member struggles with any challenge, whether that's an addiction, an eating disorder, a mental health challenge, a developmental challenge, we know that when there's a member of the family who's struggling in that way, the entire system is affected. And so I suspect that perhaps it's been hard for Christina's parents to validate the experience of Christina and maybe the experience also of Christina's younger sister. And what we know to be true is that when we are young, if there are some emotions of ours that have gone unvalidated, unwitnessed, ignored, shunned, those emotions become forbidden in our own minds. So for Christina, even today, I suspect that her feelings of anger and her feelings of resentment may feel kind of forbidden or maybe even shameful or risky or threatening or dangerous or wrong. So through our family of origin roles framework, I'm venturing to guess that her older sister is the struggling one. And so often the siblings of a struggling one feel this complicated mix of feeling invisible because the struggling one is receiving a lot of attention and a lot of airtime. And also at the same time, feeling too visible because the expectations to perform or succeed are really high on the, more typically developing siblings. So this hard both and of invisible and too visible. And Christina highlights in her question that there's this pattern, a longstanding pattern of accommodating her sister's anxiety. And when this happens, especially, in a family system that maybe is struggling with emotion coaching, what ends up happening is that the whole family system kind of morphs around the anxious individual's struggle. So it's easy for me to have compassion for the parents here. It's not it's not easy to be the parents of three girls. It's not easy to be the parents of a girl, a daughter who's struggling with a lot of anxiety. And I think when it comes to anxiety, parents end up in a bind, expecting too much ends up then maybe fueling the anxiety, reinforcing the anxiety, but then reducing expectations doesn't feel quite right either. So I'm, of course, wondering what kind of support the parents got for themselves as they were raising these three girls, one of whom sounds like was struggling pretty significantly. So we've got Christina as this middle sister. She's got an older sister who's struggled with anxiety for a long time, and she's got a younger sister who's pulling away. And so the first thing we want to do is just validate the resentment that she feels, the anger perhaps she feels, and that these are long-standing, maybe highlighted by the therapy she's been doing. But these feelings are very likely not new. They have been perhaps underground. They have felt forbidden or wrong or not okay because they've been invalidated by the family potentially, but the feelings are not necessarily new. So I'm just here to start off by validating that however she feels in relation to an older sister and watching how the family system has dealt with her anxiety, whatever those feelings are, they're just feelings. And what I want most of all is for Christina to meet her feelings with self-compassion and with curiosity. You may have heard me talk before about what the Buddhists call first arrow, second arrow. The first arrow is just however we feel about the situations in our life, however she feels about what it's like to have an older sister who's struggling. That feeling of invisibility, the feeling of feeling too visible, the feelings of resentment, the feelings of anger. So those are just feelings. That's the first arrow, is the feelings she has in this reality that has been her reality for a long time. The second arrow is what we tend to do, which is all of the judgments or stories that we wrap around our feelings, What I want Christina to do is kind of let go of that second arrow, to just be present with whatever the feelings as they are. When we can do that, it creates the conditions for us to choose our next step rather than reactively shutting down or pulling away or fighting back. So today, Christina's at this fork in the road experience. She's the first one in her family to go to therapy. And we hear her tell us that she went to therapy in the wake of a traumatic event. First of all, I'm so glad that you sought help following a traumatic event. That was incredibly smart of you to do. I wish that whatever happened to you had not happened to you. And at the very same time, you did just the right thing by reaching for therapy in the aftermath. It's in fact an important reminder for all of us. What the research shows us is that not every overwhelming experience in our life causes post-traumatic stress disorder, but when something terrible happens and we don't have the emotional support we need in the aftermath, our chances of developing post-traumatic stress disorder are much higher. So Christina was really wise to seek care following a traumatic event, and it potentially prevented her from developing that set of symptoms after the hypervigilance, the replaying it in her mind, the emotional numbing, all of that. So it was really wise. And what happened in her therapy is she not only processed that traumatic experience, she went deeper and wider, and she began to put pieces together in therapy that were related not just to the one event, but to her entire family dynamic. So she's starting to see these people that she's known forever in a different light. And that happens, and it's startling, and it's unnerving, and it's confronting. It's what happens, frankly, when we start practicing relational self-awareness, whether that is through therapy, through a podcast, through books. We start to look at the past and the present through a different lens. In fact, about 4 weeks into the Marriage 101 class that I teach at Northwestern, I make sure that my teaching assistants spend time in their small group discussions, inviting the college students to talk about the impact that the class is having on their romantic relationships, on their family dynamics, on their friendships. How are you seeing the relationships in your life differently as a result of taking the Marriage 101 class? And how are the people in your life responding differently to you and perhaps the new perspectives that you are bringing? And the students always have lots to say, and it's a helpful time to process the impact, what happens when you shake the system. So as Christina is deepening her own understanding of relationships, of course, the thing that she wants to do is she wants to bring all that knowledge, all that understanding, all that reflection to the people who matter to her. She wants to up-level the whole system. Here especially, she wants to up-level her sisters. She wants to bring them along. She wants them to be on this journey with her. What she wants to say to them is like, listen, ladies, we have lived a particular way for a very long time in this family of ours. But what I'm realizing is that's not the only way to live, and it's not how we have to live. We can grow and we can grow together. And she wants that so badly. There's something so beautiful about creating insight for yourself, shifting patterns for yourself, and then generously wanting to share that with the people around you. That desire of hers is forged in love. And I suspect it's also a desire for her to have some relief from what sounds like a pretty lonely experience. And that in and of itself creates some feelings of anger that end up being pretty uncomfortable. It's like there's a voice inside of her that is saying, like, okay, everyone, like, step it up. And if I needed to have therapy, you all need some therapy too. So there's a little bit of anger there for sure, wondering, A, how did we all get along for this long without having therapy? And if I had to do it, the least everybody else could do is, do some therapy of their own as well. And I think it's anger, and I think it's also probably grief for how things could have been if Christina and her family had access to or sought out therapy earlier, and wondering about how things could have been different is pretty painful. So That's where we're meeting Christina. She's had this awakening, almost like arguably sort of like a radicalization through therapy. And she's sad and disappointed and angry. But I also hear a lot of hope in her question, hope for a different way forward, hope for a different kind of relationship with these sisters, and hope for a dynamic where she can start to feel heard. And a way for this, it sounds like in this family, maybe the only way you get heard is to be the squeaky wheel. That is perhaps how her sister has gotten some of her needs met, is through her anxiety and through her struggle. And I hear very much that Christina would like to be able to be heard in her own right, in her own way for her own needs. And so, certainly, one thing Christina could do is just radically accept we are where we are. She could just say, I'm bumping my head against the ceiling of what's possible with my family. I can't have hard conversations with them. They will not change. It's too emotionally unsafe for me to venture into these woods. And therefore, I got to let go of the wish that things could be different. And I will tell you what, sometimes that radical acceptance is the only way forward. And sometimes what we need to do is just simply pull back our energy and seek community and connection and authenticity elsewhere. But for our purposes here, I want to give Christina more than that, right? This would be a very short episode if all we offered Christina was kind of like a shoulder shrug of, yeah, that's what happens. You go to therapy, you start to see the light, you start to live differently, and, it sucks. And the only path available is to preserve your peace and keep it moving. And she may get to that point where that is her best and only option. But let's spend some time together looking at some other pathways and possibilities. Because what I hear loud and clear is I want to be closer to my sisters. I hear love and care. I maybe also hear duty, obligation, allegiance, loyalty, even though these relationships stress her out, even though they aren't seeking out the help that she thinks they need, she's still saying, I want to figure this out. Let's point our lens for a moment, specifically on the dynamic between Christina and her older sister. So again, I don't have Christina here to fill in additional details, but I want to bring our attention to what Christina is calling her constructive criticism of her sister, right? She's saying, my sister can't handle constructive criticism. And it may very well be that Christina is incredibly gentle and loving and empathic when she approaches her sister, and her sister is entirely too fragile to hear anything that Christina has to say. But I want to plant a seed that it's possible that even though Christina thinks it's constructive criticism, there may be more heat behind Christina's words and tone and approach than even Christina recognizes. Because Christina at this point comes into the conversation with her sister with decades of her own feelings about how her sister's anxiety has been accommodated rather than challenged, rather than confronted. So Christina there may be a mismatch or a disconnect between how Christina feels she's coming across and how it's landing. Also, by the way, if her sister is not asking for or requesting input from Christina, her sister's defensiveness makes some sense. Unsolicited constructive criticism is a boundary violation. And hard as it is for Christina, I think when somebody comes to us, we call it sometimes in therapy being a help resistant complainer. So what may be happening is that Christina's older sister is complaining and she's spiraling and she's spinning. And so Christina feels like she's being teed up to offer quote unquote constructive criticism. Well, try this. How about this? You need to shift your perspective. You need to shift your approach. Da, da, da. So Christina is sort of taking the bait, but it may be that what Christina needs to do instead is say things like, wow, it sounds really tough, or what have you tried so far? Or I really believe in you that you can figure this out. So can Christina perhaps start to resist the urge to take the bait? So that's one possibility, right? Christina could shift her approach on what she does when her sister is coming to her with anxiety, with complaints, with drama. She could shift her approach and just do some kind of coaching from the sidelines rather than getting involved and, trying to offer direction or give advice that is actually not wanted or needed. I also wonder what it might be like for Christina to approach her sister for what we call like a meta conversation about how they talk to each other. And this would look like Christina saying to her sister, like, can we find a time to talk about our relationship? Making an appointment with her sister. And then let's say her older sister agrees. Then Christina maybe would say something like, listen, when you are talking to me about your life and your stressors, what I want to do is offer you suggestions and next steps. But what I am finding is that that makes you mad or it seems to make you feel bad. So I guess I wonder, what is it that you are hoping for or wanting from me when you talk to me about the drama in your life or about the things that you're struggling with or about what's really kind of anxiety provoking these days? This framing offers a few advantages. It gives Christina's older sister the floor to express herself to Christina directly. So maybe, it may be the case that nobody's actually asking Christina's older sister, what are you wanting or needing? People might be accommodating her, doting on her, worrying about her, talking about her, but not talking to her. Christina's older sister may have been taking up a lot of airtime in the family dynamic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Christina's older sister is being listened to or taken seriously or given that chance to advocate for herself. So for Christina to kind of check in with her sister and say, what is it you're wanting and needing? Is Christina empowering her older sister, giving her agency and asking her to step up a bit to advocate for herself. Also, this framing I'm proposing here gives Christina a chance to communicate to her sister, listen, I want to do the right thing, but what feels to me like it's quote unquote the right thing isn't working. In fact, it seems to make you feel bad or feel mad or push back. The other thing this meta conversation does is it gives Christina a chance to convey clearly and directly to her older sister, listen, I want to do right by you. I want to be a support to you, but help me help you. Talk to me about what it is that you are wanting and needing when you come to me with the concerns that you have. And if Christina does choose this approach of having a meta conversation around what support looks like, what expectations there are, what healthy boundaries look like, I want Christina to go in with curiosity and to go in non-defensively so that she's really able to hear and listen to and take in whatever her older sister decides to share. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. In fact, each sister has a partial view of the dynamic. There's really no objective reality or objective truth here. There's just an attempt to get clear on how each of them is experiencing the other. And it might very well be that Christina's older sister has some feedback. She might say, I just need you to listen. Or when I talk to you, Christina, about my anxiety, and you just give me a hug or you tell me I'm a badass and I'm going to figure it out, you have no idea how helpful that is. Like I can ride that high for days. And if Christina heard that, it might help her feel really liberated from some of the resentment she feels. Sometimes we feel resentful because we feel ineffective. So if Christina could hear from her sister that actually the things she offers feel really good, well, that would help Christina feel proud of herself and therefore more neutral, more generous, more energized to get back in the ring and be a cheerleader for her sister. But sometimes we end up kind of in these resentful ruts because we haven't taken the time to ask our people directly, what do you need? We've made assumptions. We've assumed they want advice. We've assumed they want a pep talk. we don't know. We don't know what they need. So I'm loving the idea here of Christina inviting her older sister into a kind of side by side, shoulder to shoulder conversation about how do we talk about the things that you struggle with. Okay, so we've explored Christina's relationship with her anxious older sister. Now let's take a look at her relationship with her younger sister, who is starting to pull away from the entire family. And as I was listening to that part of Christina's question, I was imagining Christina feeling a sense of abandonment as she watches her little sister pull away. I'm imagining Christina feeling some version of like, great, you're going to leave me here with all of this. I'm going to have to be the one holding up this whole family all by myself. Like this whole thing is hard enough as it is. But if I got to be alone in it without you, it's going to feel like entirely too much. And alongside that, I also was wondering if Christina might be feeling some jealousy vis-a-vis her younger sister. Like, who are you to walk away from this? Like, how do you get to just sort of peace out on this whole complicated family while I stay here in the muck with all of it? And this may especially be the case if Christina was more like a parentified child in the dynamic, and her younger sister perhaps was more of an easy one or maybe a rebel. And by the way, when I use those terms, struggling one, parentified child, easy one, rebel, those are all the terms that are pulled from my Family of Origin role series, which we did on the podcast a while back. And all those episodes are linked in the show notes. So here again, I'm wanting a conversation between Christina and the younger sister. So I'm picturing a similar sort of side by side conversation, a going meta conversation about the state of the relationship. And so this would start again with Christina making an appointment with her little sister and saying something like, I wonder if you're available to listen to some of the observations I've had. And then saying, I've noticed from where I stand over the last, whatever, X number of months or X number of years, you seem to be pulling back a bit from our family. And on the one hand, I get it because it's really hard and it's messy. And sometimes our family is, not coping as well as we wish they were. And at the same time, what I'm aware of is that when you pull away or when I sense you pulling away, I have some feelings about it. And I wonder if we could talk a bit about how each of us is feeling these days in our family dynamic. And if Christina's younger sister is available and willing to engage, maybe Christina can go a little bit further and say something to her sister like, I miss you. And I want us to figure out how we can protect our relationship from the impact of this really difficult dynamic. I want us to find a way to connect over the frustrations that I suspect we both share. And I suspect there's maybe more in common between our perspectives than there is difference. And I'm also available to hear if there are things that you feel like I'm doing that's making the dynamic worse. And maybe I won't agree with it. Maybe I won't be able to change it. But if part of why you're pulling away is because of something that has to do with me, I want you to know that I'm available to listen, to hear, and to try and understand where you're coming from. So I think that framing, again, if Christina can muster curiosity and non defensiveness, I think that kind of gentle reach out may help Christina have a deeper understanding of her sister's pulling away behavior and may be able to create just some alliance, not an alliance against anybody else in the family, but a sense of shared struggle. And who knows? There's lots of possibilities about why Christina's younger sister has pulled away. And maybe it's been communicated to the younger sister directly or indirectly that Christina's in charge and Christina's the only one who can handle this stuff. And maybe Christina's little sister has felt like, okay, well, there's no place for me, And that'd be helpful for Christina to know that her sister's pulling away because her sister feels like nobody needs or wants her perspective. And Christina can maybe say, no, 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 no. I want and need your help. I want to be on this team together with you. I need your support. And even if you, little sister, aren't available to deal with our older sister, and even if you, little sister, are not available to interface with our parents, Can you at least be available to interface with me? Right? Can you back me up so that I don't feel as distraught when I come away from an interaction with them? So that I feel like there's somebody I can turn to for witnessing or validation. So there might be a really important place for Christina's younger sister, even if younger sister isn't dealing directly with older sister, even if younger sister isn't dealing directly with parents. Younger sister can be an ally to Christina and kind of pump her tires, as my podcast producer likes to say. Younger sister can kind of pump Christina's tires and validate her and empathize with her so that Christina can stay engaged with older sister, with parents. I'm feeling like younger sister is maybe the best leverage point in the system for Christina, and I really want Christina and her younger sister to find ways to be close, even if they have different coping strategies, even if they play different roles. It's an opportunity for Christina to convey to her little sister, listen, you matter. I need you. You have an important role in this family. I don't want you to fade away. Your support of me matters. I think in a complicated family system, it's really easy to get locked in a blame game. And if there's decades of history, the story here is so complex. As family therapists like to say, this problem is too big for blame. So, what we're going for here are curious conversations where people can come together and find those places in which they're on the same team and look together at some positive steps that they might be able to take together. The last thought I have about the relationship between Christina and her younger sister is that Christina mentioned that she and her younger sister in particular have some shared interests. And I suspect that maybe there's been less time for the two of them to engage in those shared interests together. And, if the overall equation in our relationships is to do less of the bad stuff and more of the good stuff, you know, I want the two of them to be investing in the good stuff, to be doing the stuff they love together. So even if Christina doesn't go for the kind of curious, vulnerable meta conversation, could Christina reach out to her younger sister and just do some stuff together, like return to those things, whether it was, I don't know, museums or concerts or shopping or, some other activity together, whatever it is that's kind of like their happy place together. Can they just do that? And it's like, oh, there you are kind of an experience, and building that cushion of positivity. So even if they aren't having the hard conversation, building positive connection may ease for Christina that sense of I'm different, I'm alone, nobody really gets me, and they each can have that experience of we are spending time together because we want to, because we value each other rather than obligation or duty. And you may have heard me say before, all of our relationships involve some mix of duty and desire. But I think for Christina these days, the relationships feel very loaded down by duty, and she's less in touch with desire and choice and the want to be with her family members. So, can she tap into that experience and that old feeling of like, I want to be with my little sister because she's somebody I love? We have a lot in common. So, can they actively be boosting those feelings of positivity and connection? I said before that Christina's story is that going to therapy has led her to see her family dynamics in a new light. I want to take it a step further because what Christina might be missing is that it's not just that doing therapy has led her to see the family dynamics in a different light. It's also the case that Christina going to therapy has changed the dynamics in the family system. Christina feels things differently now. Very likely, Christina behaves differently now. And even though, from Christina's perspective, she has been on this really beautiful, really important, really powerful evolution that she wants everyone else to come along on, the changes that Christina has made may feel threatening to her family members, and they may feel somewhat intimidated or bewildered by her newfound self awareness, her empowered communication, her ability to express her opinions, the way she navigates boundaries now in a way she didn't before. Christina has new language for her experience, and her family members may feel like she is being condescending, even though, let's be clear, even though I have every confidence that no part of Christina is intending to be condescending. It may be that the impact of Christina's evolution is that her family feels, quote unquote, less than, condescended to. When one person has been engaging in healing work and others have not, it changes the dynamic of the family. So other people in the family may be consciously or unconsciously kind of upping the ante, turning up the volume on their behaviors in an effort to move Christina back into her old behaviors because change is uncomfortable. So there might be a kind of push and pull. And I want Christina to be able to see that bigger picture and to know that she's co-creating the very dynamic that she's protesting against. And my point here is for Christina to be aware that the members of her family might feel that she is being patronizing, even though she's not intending to be, right? There's no intent at all for Christina to be patronizing. Christina wants the family to evolve with her. But the feeling that the family members, the sisters and the parents might have is Christina judges us. Christina's disappointed in us. Christina thinks that she's better than us. These are just my hypotheses. And there's nothing really for Christina to do about that, right? Christina's not going to be able to unsee what she's seen. She's not going to be able to unfeel what she has felt. We don't want Christina to shrink down or to kind of curtail her evolution. But can Christina, if she knows that her changes have the power to change the system, then perhaps she could have a little bit more curiosity, a little bit more patience, and a little bit more grace. So nothing for Christina to change, but just for her to just be present to the fact that she is, by her very nature, influencing the dynamics around her. Okay, so I want to talk now about family therapy. So Christina may already have suggested therapy to her sisters because it's been so helpful to Christina. Unfortunately, sometimes that desire for loved ones to get help ends up getting lost in translation. What Christina is saying to her sisters is, I want you to have this thing, therapy, that has helped me so much. But what the sisters might be hearing is, you're messed up, you're pathological, something's wrong with you, you need help. Again, not Christina's intent, but that might be the impact. So I want to invite and challenge Christina to try it differently. And I want to propose 3 possibilities for the invitation that Christina could make. First of all, I want to suggest sister therapy, family therapy for these sisters. What I'm imagining here is the trio of sisters hires a family therapist who sees them perhaps individually, in dyads, and a triad to meet the goal of improving communication between the sisters and deepening connection between the sisters. And if you go this route of hiring a family therapist, you're probably going to want to hire an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist. Why? Because those are the therapists who have been specifically trained to work with systems. In fact, I will tell you, if you find a family therapist and call them up and tell them that you want some sister therapy, they are going to be really excited. Doing that kind of work with an adult sibling system can be really rewarding work for a family therapist. So that's my first recommendation, family therapy. Second option is for Christina to hire a therapist for herself, But a therapist where Christina says, hey, listen, I want to hire you as my therapist, but I want you to be actively helping me shape the relationships with different parts of the system. So option one is family therapy. Option two is Christina's individual therapy with guest family sessions. So Christina invites her sister in for a couple of sessions. Christina invites her older sister in for some sessions. Christina invites her parents in. So Christina is the hub, and this is kind of like systemic therapy, relationships therapy, designed to help Christina improve the relationships with the different people in her family. Option three is if Christina already has an individual therapist that she knows and loves, she and her individual therapist can talk together about the idea of inviting one sister at a time into therapy for what we call guest sessions. And some individual therapists don't work this way and won't work this way. So it might not be an option, but it also might be worth a try. So under this plan, this option three plan, it's Christina's therapy, but there are some guest sessions with a clear, specific, tight plan for Christina to have conversations with her sisters with the guidance of the therapist. So Christina and her therapist are coming up with an agenda and figuring out the goal and the intent. And then Christina makes the invite. Hey, I'm in therapy. You know, I'm in therapy. And my therapist and I were wondering if you would be interested in coming in for a session to talk about X, Y, and Z. And I would want Christina, if she's going for path three, to be explicit with her sisters. This is not a plan for me to convince you to start your own therapy. Rather, it's sort of like, I would love for you to join me for a session or two because I really want to improve my relationship with you. And I think that my therapist is going to be able to be helpful in terms of improving our connection. It may be that this ends up being kind of a little amuse-bouche, if you will, like a little sampler of what therapy feels like if these sisters have never been to therapy. For Christina to invite them into her therapy as guests, it might be kind of a chance to kind of socialize them, familiarize them with what therapy is about, and then they may go on to hire their own therapists. Also, P.S., kind of a beneficial side note is for Christina to do some guest sessions in her existing therapy with these sisters. It gives the individual therapist kind of an interesting window, right? Because right now, Christina's individual therapist only knows of these sisters through Christina's telling, through Christina's description of her sisters. And to do a guest session gives Christina's therapist a chance to see how Christina interacts with the sisters, how the sisters respond. So it has potential also of deepening the impact of Christina's individual therapy. Okay, so those are three possible paths. Number one, family therapy. Number two, individual therapy that has a strong systemic focus. Number three, guest sessions with the sisters in your already established individual therapy. So I've given Christina a lot to chew on, and we're teeing up some potentially difficult, but maybe beautiful and vulnerable and curious conversations to have. But again, I want to say Christina deserves so many pats on the back. And I hope that for anybody in a similar situation, make sure that you take these points to heart as well. Good for you to go to therapy after a traumatic event. Good for you to be a trailblazer and a pattern breaker in your family. And good for you to have the courage to stay invested in these relationships, even though they've been painful for you. And that really shows your love of family, your humility, your belief in change. You're frustrated, but you have not yet let your frustration turn into bitterness, and you want to create connection. And I really respect that. And everything I'm suggesting here requires effort and strength and humility. And it sounds like if it's going to happen, if anything's going to happen in this family, it's going to be you, Christina, that initiates it. So I hope that you can remind yourself that it matters and that no matter the outcome or how anybody responds, there's growth for you in the effort, you know? And thank you. Thank you for your question. It let us explore some themes that are relevant and salient for so many of us. Before we wrap the episode up, I want to address some other great questions that have come in since we started sharing the Family of Origin Roles series on the podcast. So thank you to everyone who listened this winter. If you missed the episodes, they're in the show notes. We got so much engagement on this series, including some really good questions. So keep sending in your questions and I will keep addressing them. So question number 1 is, did you come up with these particular terms used in your podcast? I found other sources that use different names to sort of refer to similar archetypes. Where did this idea originate from? My answer here is to give props where props are due. So Virginia Satir is the founding mama in the field of family therapy, and she was the first to talk about dysfunctional family roles. And Claudia Black and Sharon Weidiger Cruz are family therapists who have written about family rules and family roles in families where somebody is struggling with addiction. So my operationalizing of those 6 particular roles that I talk about emerges from and is informed by that prior family systems work. And so different clinicians over the years have come up with different framings of what are the common patterns. So the language that I use reflects my experience, and the framing out of the function and the gifts and the growing edges is an extension of prior work in that area. All right, number 2, do people fall into a role only in a dysfunctional family system, or is it inevitable in any family system for people to fall into roles? So, what I've been saying is that when a family system is struggling, the roles do tend to be more intense and more one dimensional and more narrow. So I think the intensity, the rigidity, and the narrowness of the role is directly proportional to the amount of dysfunction in the system. So in a family that's operating pretty well, there's some amount of role based behavior, certainly, but it probably feels more like I tend to be this way rather than I have to be this way. And I suspect that if you were in a quote unquote higher functioning family, you may feel a sense of familiarity with a lot of these different roles, because part of the privilege of a well functioning family is that you get to show up in lots of different kinds of ways and still feel like you belong and still feel like you're emotionally safe. Number 3, is it possible to fall into multiple roles or to wear different hats depending on what's going on in the family? And I would say that over the last year or so, I have taught this concept to thousands of people. And that's the question that I get most frequently, which is some version of my role changed over time, or I think I have a different role in different contexts. And that makes total sense to me. The idea, what I think is helpful is to kind of map, like look across time. Did you play one role during your childhood and a different role in your adolescence? Oftentimes, what I find is that somebody's role changed based on either a normative or an extraordinary shift in the system. It's like I played one role and then my older sibling headed to college and I started to play a different role. Or I played one role and then a parent passed away, or my parents got divorced, or a parent lost a job, whatever the kind of unplanned crisis was or unplanned change was, that initiated the person into a different kind of a role. Okay, next question is similar. Could I have been one role at one time and another role at another time? Yes, absolutely. So I think what's helpful to think about is with these roles, we're not trying to give you a hard and fast label. It's not a diagnosis code. It's not a blood type. It's not even a personality trait. It's a way of capturing a set of relational behaviors. So just use it as a framework, use it as a conversation opener, use it as a way of understanding yourself and your tendencies, as well as a way of understanding the people you love and their tendencies. I was recently giving a talk and a woman was like, I was an easy one in my childhood. She said, I often describe myself as wallpaper. When I was a kid, I was wallpaper. I was an easy one. I got missed, passed over, left behind again and again. But when I became an adult, I said, hell no, never again. And now I'm a rebel. Like, I express my opinion all the time. I will not let myself fade into the background under any conditions. And in fact, for my wife, it is now the bane of our existence because I pipe up about things that I don't need to pipe up around. So she was describing this kind of like 180 from easy one to rebel. And that now in her marriage, she's trying to figure out kind of a middle path, between wallpaper and the one who can't let anything pass her by. And then the last question is, what if I'm an only child? I think, again, take what makes sense for you from the framework. But what I will say is what people I have met and done this work with in the last, 18 months have oftentimes said that as an only child, you see yourself in all of the roles, because you were the entire child tier of the family system. But what only children tend to say to me is that the roles they most likely gravitate towards are that perfect one or the parentified one. So the role you took on as an only child wasn't you vis-a-vis your siblings, but it still was you becoming and being who your parents needed you to be. Okay, that's a wrap for this episode. We covered lots of ground. Thank you again, Christina, for your thoughtful question. It was a great canvas for us to explore some family systems issues, and I hope that it paves a really wonderful way forward for your family. And again, there are resources in the show notes about family of origin work. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening, and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.